Hi there, my name's Bruce Robertson. I've been involved in local government for around about 4 decades, mostly as an auditor with the Audit Office, but more recently I've become an independent member on 10 local authority audit and risk committees. So the topic for me today is actually about council financing and funding. And there's probably 3 key points I'd like you to take on board as you start understanding finances, because it is, to use that word, a journey. 3 points are simply, firstly, be confident. Be confident in who you are and the common sense that you bring. Secondly, be aware. Be aware of actually what are your statutory responsibilities under the Local Government Act, because they are important and set the tone for the financing and funding of a local authority. The third point is bring your judgment, because there are 3 things that only councillors and councillors as a group can do. Management can't do it, only you can do it in consultation with ratepayers. So be confident. I've said bring your common sense. There will be much in your background, whether you've run a business, whether you've been a member of a team employed in business or the public sector, whether you've been running a home as a parent. There will be many things that are straightforward common sense. They are incredibly relevant and actually what needs to be brought to the management of council's finances and funding. But do remember that also within council you have the support of management. You've got a director of finance, and that person will be running a whole set of systems, planning, reporting, providing advice that helps you live out the responsibilities that you actually have. And there are a whole management team working with the chief executive and the director of finance who you can have confidence in and trust. The second point I wanted to raise was about being aware. So be confident, bring your common sense. The second point I wanted to raise was simply be aware of your responsibilities. And the Local Government Act does say that you have some responsibilities that you need to be aware of. And they're pretty simple. There's 4 of them. The first one is Section 10 of the Act. And it simply says that you must seek to deliver cost-effective, affordable services to your community. And in fact, it even says not just for tomorrow, but for the long term. Many of you that are on territorial local authorities will know that you are dealing with assets that are long-lived. They are multi-generational. You have to have a view for the long term. The second key principle is in Section 14 of the Act. It says actually your council should be business-like. Just as you think matters should be run anywhere else outside of a council, the same disciplines should apply to a council. The third key provision is Section 100 of the Act, and this is possibly the most critical when it comes to funding and finance, which simply says, when you read all the sections, it boils down to you must be prudent in how you manage the finances and funding of your council. And it gives a wee hint as to how to do that by going 1 section back to Section 100, which says that you must balance your budget every year. That simply means your revenue that comes in must exceed or equal at the very least how much you spend. Again, that is all common sense, and you folk have been elected for your common sense. The third point that I am very keen to bring today is actually where you as councillors have to bring your judgment. And you have to balance a number of things. And you are the only people in your council that can do this. Clearly with the advice of management, but this is the core of your financial and funding responsibilities. The first thing is You've got to determine what is the service that you deliver. It's not how much you spend, it's actually what service you want to deliver. Now, some of those are already prescribed by legislation. But do you want to provide that community pool? Do you want to provide that museum? Do you want a better collection service for your rubbish and landfill? These are key questions that only you can determine. And it's you as councillors that will determine that level of service. But of course, that level of service has financial implications. So the second key point of it is actually to tote up the cost and then to work out who pays. And I really would suggest that you think about this. The judgment that you must bring to this is actually who pays, what, why, and when. Who pays what, why, and when. Why is this important? Because actually you determine a policy called a revenue and financing policy that will specifically determine that. Most of your income comes from ratepayers. Across the sector, it's probably around about 60%. Certainly with some councils, it's edging above 70, getting closer to 80%. So if you have high aspirations for a level of service and an equal cost, you also have to be prepared to figure out how and who is going to pay for that, and primarily that's going to come from rates. That is a difficult balancing act that you will have to approach every year that you are an elected member. So that all comes back to then the key question, can I deliver affordable services to my community? Bring your judgment. Only you can make that decision. And as many of you know, that's of course what you'll be accountable for, both annually and also at the ballot box. So I've said my three key points: be confident, be aware, and bring your judgment. There's a couple of other points I'd like to make, which is firstly, how do you do it? How do you go about this? And it's pretty simple. You have to start by planning. And even though it is not until 2021, one of the first key tasks of your new council is to work towards setting a 10-year long-term plan. Yes, your judgment around what service to deliver, how to fund it, and whether it's affordable has to think out at least 10 years. Secondly, you'll be part of the system to monitor that you're on track. So again, this becomes important that you have an effective relationship and understanding of your role to monitor versus the role of management to deliver. The other little point I wanted to make around particularly monitoring is I've emphasised services rather than expenditure, although the two are related. If you're going to see that your funding and financing policies work well, you need to also be able to monitor the non-financial delivery of services. You may spend your budget, but does it actually deliver the service? You need to have an eye for that as you think about your funding and financing. And the final point I'd like to raise is actually about debt. Debt is something which will be discussed again at some length in councils. Councils do make use of debt. It's an enabler. And in fact, they've set up an agency called the Local Government Funding Agency that most councils belong to. And it's an enabler to allow you to contemplate building big assets in particular, or to renew big assets and to pay for it over time. That sounds familiar. Again, it's just common sense. However, it needs to be thought of carefully within the context that you are asking the ratepayer ultimately to pay back that debt over time. So that's a snapshot, a quick run. What I want to reflect is finally your commitment. I've said, be confident, be aware, bring your judgment, use the system to manage and monitor your finances. You now have to bring your commitment to understanding how your council finances and funds it. You need to understand how you fit within its processes for planning and monitoring. And the other thing you have to do is bring your trust. Trust that the committee structure, the Audit and Risk Committee, the work of management will all work together along with you to appropriately and adequately manage affordable delivery of services to your community.
So the first thing I'd say about decision making in local government is it's a pretty lengthy and complex process. Going into a council, I thought that within a year I would have changed my whole community and made some major decisions that really changed the world. However, it takes a bit longer than that, and it involves engagement with a range of stakeholders. So I think that the first thing to understand is there is a robust process, and it does take some time. But from a personal perspective, having gone through those processes, I think it's a really useful process. If we think about any problem, we can't solve that in one day, more often than not, particularly complex problems. So we need that opportunity to go through iterations of solutions. And so in the process as a councillor, you're often coming up with some initial ideas on how you might tackle an issue or an opportunity, but there's plenty of opportunities to engage with our community, to engage with key stakeholders around our community, and refine that idea and get a better understanding of both the issue and the potential solutions to that issue. The other point I'd make about decision making in local government is that it's a highly collaborative process, and there's a need to engage with community, with various stakeholders all the way through that process to ensure that where we land in terms of a final decision aligns with the aspirations and the concerns of our community.
So when you're making decisions on behalf of your community, you will be relating to many weeks of prior consultation, advice from staff, comments from people in the community, and you'll also be guided a lot by legislation and some of the procedures that you need to follow as a council. So you'll have plenty of information to make the decisions that you need to.
Gosh, it's interesting how councillors do receive their information. When I started years ago, it was great swathes of paper. That's incredibly inefficient. And now most councils will equip councillors with electronic delivery. So that's the iPad, that's the notebook, that's the thing us old people call a computer, which actually is the most efficient way to receive that information. But again, as a person also that's had to get used to that, I just want to reflect that actually it's not just giving you the electronic means, but they'll also give you the tools to be able to mark, to annotate, to be able to actually record your points that you want to make in a meeting. So all it's doing is simply replacing the physical page with an electronic page. Best advice from me is it's not just financial information that you will receive on an iPad, it is the multitude of papers that you need to receive, and this is, once you jump in the deep end, the quickest, most efficient way for you to carry out your responsibilities as a councillor.
Kia ora, I'm Fran Wild, Chair of the Remuneration Authority, which sets the pay for all local government elected members, amongst other groups. In the last couple of years, we've reviewed local government, in particular looking at the workloads and the time commitments of people on different sorts of councils. We then created a scale on which all councils are placed relative to one another in terms of the size of each council's responsibilities. For councils, we now have a pool system, which means each council is allocated an amount of money and can then decide within its pool how much a specific role is worth, with a minimum base councillor rate. We will still set the actual remuneration for mayors, regional council chairs and members of community boards and Auckland local boards. There is no performance pay or additional remuneration available. We know that people don't run for office for the money. but the pay should not be a barrier for those with family and other responsibilities. So we're in the process of gradually lifting local government pay in order to fairly reward elected members and make sure that we have a diversity of people on councils. If you want to know more, please look at our website. Thank you.